As Jasmine Croquette strode purposefully toward her designated seat in the chamber, an air of solemnity settled over the room. The bright, relentless glare of the C-SPAN cameras captured every movement she made, broadcasting her entrance to the world with unwavering clarity. Today's session of the House Oversight Committee was expected to proceed in a routine manner, primarily focusing on the allocation of federal funds for the state's infrastructure projects. It was supposed to be a standard, perhaps even dull meeting, one of many that dealt with budgetary appropriations and logistical planning. No one anticipated that this particular gathering would erupt into the most significant political showdown of the year, turning an ordinary hearing into a dramatic battleground of ideologies and personalities. At that precise moment, Clay Higgins, a former sheriff of Louisiana, known for his fiery temperament and blunt speaking style, was waiting intently for his opportunity to speak. His anticipation was palpable as he leaned slightly forward, eyes fixed on the proceedings. Just moments before Croquette settled into her seat, Higgins rose from his chair and approached the microphone, causing a ripple of expectation among those present. His voice cut sharply through the silence, commanding attention with a tone that was both confident and confrontational. Maybe the gentleman from Texas would be better served focusing on issues affecting his own state instead of delivering lectures on how to manage our districts, Higgins declared, his Louisiana accent thick with disdain. His words dripped with contempt, reflecting not only his personal disdain, but also his characteristic attitude of defiance toward what he perceived as unwarranted criticism from colleagues. Some of us have been working real jobs long before stepping into politics, ma'am. We didn't just walk into Congress armed with outstanding law degrees and zero practical experience, he added, his voice tinged with a mixture of sarcasm and defiance. The chamber erupted into a stunned silence. Committee members froze in place, caught off guard by the sharpness of Higgins' remarks. Jasmine Croquette's head snapped up sharply, her gaze narrowing as she directed her eyes across the room toward Higgins, who stood several feet away. The tension in the room escalated almost immediately, and what unfolded next would leave everyone present utterly speechless, because Jasmine Croquette, with her poised composure and undeniable presence, had no immediate response prepared for such an attack. What followed was a moment of raw, unanticipated confrontation. Croquette, instead of retaliating with empty words, pulled from her arsenal a set of irrefutable facts about Higgins' own record, facts that expose vulnerabilities and contradictions in his persona. These revelations struck him at his core, transforming what was meant to be a simple cross-examination into what would become the most damaging mistake of his entire political career. The facts she presented cast a spotlight on Higgins' own shortcomings, turning his attack into a mirror that reflected his past missteps and questionable actions, thereby neutralizing his offensive and shifting the momentum decisively in her favor. Before delving into this extraordinary sequence of events, it's worth noting that to stay up to date with the latest political developments, one should follow the recommended channels and notifications, ensuring that no critical updates are missed. Now let's examine how Jasmine Croquette managed to turn what could have been a damaging insult into the most viral scandal of the year 2025 in Congress. Clay Higgins had built his entire political image around the persona of a tough, no-nonsense former sheriff, someone who refused to play by the conventional rules of Washington politics. At the age of 63, this Republican from Louisiana had been serving in Congress since 2017. He styled himself as a Sun Jun John Wayne, embodying the archetype of rugged individualism and confrontational toughness. In his campaign videos, Higgins appeared clad in tactical police gear, emphasizing his law enforcement background, and his confrontational videos on YouTube, many dating back to his days in law enforcement, had gone viral long before he ever sought national office. Prior to his election to Congress, Higgins had left his position as sheriff of St. Landry Parish amid scandal, partly related to his aggressive and provocative videos for Crime Stoppers. Later on, he faced criticism for filming a political ad from the confines of a Nazi concentration camp exhibit and for issues related to unpaid alimony. Despite these controversies in his strongly Republican Louisiana district, where voters were known for their fervent support of conservative principles, Higgins's straightforward, businesslike conservatism continued to earn him electoral victories. His reputation as a blunt and uncompromising figure resonated with his constituents, allowing him to maintain his seat despite mounting scrutiny. Over the course of several months, Higgins found himself increasingly frustrated as new Democratic members gained prominence and attracted national attention. Among these was Jasmine Croquette, a 44-year-old rising star from Texas whose political path diverged sharply from Higgins. Croquette's background as a civil rights attorney, fighting against voter suppression and police misconduct, starkly contrasted with Higgins' law enforcement persona. Her ascent in Congress threatened to overshadow Higgins's. She received her legal education at the prestigious Law Center, affiliated with the University of Houston. Before her ascent to the role of a congresswoman in the year 2023, she had built a reputation working within the Texas House of Representatives, where she was widely recognized for her fervent advocacy of voting rights and her commitment to reforming the criminal justice system. As one of the newest voices representing progressive ideals in Congress, she quickly gained notoriety for her sharp legal mind and her remarkable ability to clarify complex issues using clear and accessible language. Nonetheless, many underestimated her thorough preparation and the depth of her expertise. Beneath her confident demeanor lay a steadfast dedication to research and meticulous analysis, qualities that would soon turn out to be a source of nightmares for her opponent, Higgins. That day's hearing was ostensibly focused on funding priorities for federal infrastructure projects, with representatives from various agencies scheduled to testify. Louisiana and Texas were both expected to receive substantial allocations, but disagreements arose regarding the equitable distribution of those funds. As Higgins launched an unexpected personal attack, the atmosphere shifted instantly, and the scope of the debate expanded far beyond mere infrastructure funding. It became a contest not just about dollars and cents, but about asserting dominance and control over the narrative. For Higgins, the confrontation had become a means to undermine the young, progressive congresswoman and to assert dominance in what he perceived as his political territory. For Croquette, however, this moment represented an opportunity to stand firm against intimidation tactics, methods that had no place in the respectful environment of congressional hearings. The chairman of the committee, clearly uneasy with the unfolding hostility, attempted to intervene, aiming to steer the discussion back to the matter at hand. "Ms. Louisiana, please focus your comments on the topic under discussion," he implored, seeking to restore order. Yet Higgins was undeterred. Ignoring the chairman's plea, he pressed on with increased intensity, declaring, "The problem with Washington today is that individuals like this Texas congressman, who have never built anything, never managed a business, and never worn a badge, come here and tell the rest of America how to live." His words hung heavily in the room, and all eyes shifted sharply toward Croquette, the target of his attack. Everyone wondered how she would respond, whether she would take the bait and react emotionally or remain composed and steadfast in her principles. Would she succumb to the provocation, or would she have other plans entirely? A subtle but confident smile appeared on Croquette's face as she calmly spoke. "It's time to respond." What none present realized was that this exchange of barbs was about to escalate far beyond personal insults. It was poised to become a masterclass in political counterattack, a moment that Higgins would regret for the rest of his career, wishing he had never opened his mouth. The committee chair, visibly reluctant, acknowledged Croquette's presence and perhaps hoped to diffuse the tension and redirect the focus to the original agenda. In just 3 minutes, Croquette would turn the tide. She adjusted her microphone, her demeanor markedly more controlled and composed compared to Higgins's visibly agitated state. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she said, her voice steady and measured. She paused for a moment, locking eyes with Higgins before addressing the assembly. "Today, I had intended to discuss the funding of infrastructure projects that are vital for our community's growth and prosperity." Her tone was firm but respectful. "That is precisely why we were sent here by those who elected us. But since the gentleman from Louisiana seems more interested in digging into personal history than engaging in meaningful policy discussions, perhaps it's time we address that as well." Her words resonated through the hearing room, marking a decisive moment in a tense and charged exchange. With her calm, deliberate response, she not only defended her integrity, but also subtly challenged the distraction Higgins had attempted to introduce, reaffirming her focus on the issues that mattered most to the people she represented. She opened the folder that lay in front of her and carefully extracted several pages that had been printed out. As she did so, The quiet in the room grew more pronounced, the usual hum of conversation fading into a subdued stillness. The members of the committee exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Yet what followed was not the reaction they had been expecting. This gentleman, who had just spoken, was now suggesting that she should be concerned about issues affecting her own country. It was a surprising statement, especially coming from a representative of a state that consistently ranked near the bottom in nearly every measure of success and well-being across the nation. Higgins leaned forward slightly, his face darkening with what seemed to be a mixture of irritation and resolve. His tone carried an air of authority, demanding that the proceedings follow a certain order. The order of the meeting, he stated, is a matter of procedure. Yet his words were met with a calm but firm reply. The chairman, evidently caught off guard, appeared somewhat embarrassed, unsure how to respond to the exchange. A kind woman whose demeanor was both poised and respectful began addressing the comments, which Higgins himself had initiated. "I will allow her to continue," she said gently, her voice steady and measured. Croquette nodded in acknowledgement, a subtle gesture that signaled his agreement. "Thank you," she responded, then continued. "Now, since Congressman Higgins believes my education and experience are relevant to this discussion, I think it's only fair to share some factual information about Louisiana, something that someone with real-world experience might find worth considering before offering unsolicited lectures." She lifted the first document from her stack and began to speak. According to the latest data from the United States Census Bureau and the Department of Education, Louisiana ranks 48th in education, 46th in healthcare, 50th in crime and correctional facilities, 49th in opportunities, and 48th in infrastructure, precisely the areas under review during today's hearing. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly tense as her words sank in. Several committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their expressions hinting at discomfort or unease. Croquet, meanwhile, was just beginning his turn to speak. The congressman had mentioned the importance of real work and authentic life experience, an assertion she found compelling. "I find this very enlightening," she continued. "Before I came to serve in Congress, I worked as a civil rights attorney, defending the constitutional rights of Americans across the nation. I was also involved in my state's legislative assembly, but what is perhaps most important is that I grew up witnessing my mother juggling multiple jobs, working tirelessly to support our family. That is the kind of real, tangible work I understand firsthand." Croquet flipped through the pages of his notes, preparing to respond. "Now, since the gentleman has brought up qualifications," she said, "let's examine the concrete results in his own district. In Louisiana's 3rd Congressional District, which Congressman Higgins has represented for over 8 years, the poverty rate stands at 19.2%, significantly higher than the national average. The high school graduation rate in this district is among the lowest in the country, at just over 81%. Higgins once again attempted to interrupt her, but she pressed on calmly. "Mr. Chairman," she said, "these interruptions are not merely disruptions. They are interruptions of the facts." Croquet sharply interjected, "These are the statistics of your state, your district. If the facts seem like an attack, perhaps it's worth reflecting on that." The chairman intervened, urging everyone to maintain civility. "Let's try to keep this discussion respectful," he said, his tone emphasizing the importance of decorum. Croquet nodded in agreement, acknowledging the point. "Of course, Mr. Chairman," he responded politely. "Respectfulness is indeed vital, especially in discussions like this." She turned the page to a new section of her notes. The gentleman had mentioned infrastructure. "So, let's talk about Louisiana's infrastructure, which is precisely why we are gathered here today. It is a topic that requires honest examination and constructive dialogue, because the state's infrastructure issues have significant impacts on the quality of life for millions of residents. According to data provided by the American Society of Civil Engineers, the state of Louisiana holds the position of 3rd highest in the nation when it comes to the development and state of its infrastructure. An alarming statistic reveals that more than 1 in 8 bridges within the state are plagued by structural deficiencies, marking it as the 5th most affected state nationwide in terms of bridge safety and integrity. This situation underscores the magnitude of ongoing infrastructural challenges faced by Louisiana, despite considerable efforts and investments. During a recent gathering, several members of the Republican committee found themselves quietly rearranging papers on the table, deliberately avoiding direct eye contact with one another. It was evident that a certain discomfort, or perhaps a sense of unease, had settled over the room, as if everyone was trying to avoid confrontation or uncomfortable truths. Meanwhile, some members of the Democratic faction appeared to conceal their surprise, their expressions flickering with subtle hints of astonishment at the prepared response delivered by Croquette, which seemed to aim at challenging or deflecting the ongoing criticisms. Croquette, speaking with a tone that grew more animated and compelling, continued with her pointed observations. "But what concerns me even more," she said, her voice gaining clarity and strength, "is that, despite the fact that over the past decade, Louisiana has received billions of dollars, funds allocated specifically for disaster recovery and infrastructure repair, it still struggles to resolve these fundamental issues that continue to threaten its communities." Her words highlighted the paradox of significant financial aid being allocated, yet tangible progress remaining elusive. This led her to a rhetorical question, subtly criticizing the focus of some political figures. "So, when this gentleman suggests I should worry about the problems facing my own state," she asked, her tone tinged with skepticism, "I can't help but wonder if he's too busy filming political videos to truly prioritize his responsibilities." The tension in the room became palpable as her words cut through the atmosphere, emphasizing the disconnect between political posturing and real issues on the ground. What had initially appeared to be an attempt by Higgins to belittle or demean Croquette quickly escalated into something far more serious, a direct challenge to his effectiveness as a representative. Higgins's face darkened noticeably, his expression hardening as he responded with urgent insistence, pressing a button that signaled his demand for acknowledgement. The chairperson, seemingly with no better option left, addressed him cautiously. Mr. Chair, I believe this kind woman is overstepping. She is selectively citing statistics to paint a distorted picture of my state and district." His words reflected a defensive posture, attempting to counter the implications of her critique. He continued, emphasizing the severe challenges Louisiana faced. "The state has endured unprecedented natural disasters and historic hardships that these numbers simply do not capture." His tone was a mixture of frustration and a desire to defend his constituents' resilience. Croquette raised her hand, signaling her intent to speak, and challenged him directly. "I'll give this gentleman 15 seconds, she said, "if he can name even one indicator where Louisiana ranks among the top 20 states in the country." Her challenge hung in the air, demanding concrete proof. A profound silence fell over the chamber as everyone waited. Higgins stared at her, momentarily at a loss for words, clearly taken aback by her boldness. After a pause, Croquette added softly, "Time's up." Her words carried a quiet finality, asserting that no further rebuttal was necessary. "Exactly," she confirmed, her tone steady and assured. The chair, desperately attempting to regain control of the proceedings, tried to steer the discussion elsewhere. "I believe we should return to the topic of infrastructure funding," he suggested, hoping to shift focus away from the confrontation. However, Higgins was not about to let Croquette have the last word. His gaze sharpened, and he declared that the kindly woman from Texas might have her own statistics, but she lacked a true understanding of Louisiana's spirit and soul. "Our people," he said with conviction, "possess perseverance and determination that no high numbers can truly reflect." Croquette nodded in acknowledgement and responded with equal conviction. "I completely agree with you regarding the residents of Louisiana, Congressman," she said. "They deserve much better than what they are currently receiving." Her words served as a seamless transition to her next point, which she prepared to deliver with calm confidence. Drawing another document from her folder, she observed that several committee members leaned forward in anticipation, eager to hear what she was about to say. What had begun as a personal clash of personalities quickly evolved into a substantive debate about governance and tangible results. Croquette methodically moved closer to articulating her main argument, each statement gradually intensifying Higgins's visible irritation. The Louisiana gentleman, having doubted her qualifications and suggesting she focus on her own state, had unwittingly fueled her resolve. Croquette, maintaining her composure, continued to speak in a measured, even tone, determined to make her points clearly and effectively, regardless of the opposition she faced. Let me take a moment to share with you a set of figures that I believe are particularly significant and worth considering carefully. The woman in the scene had just retrieved a recent document and placed it prominently in front of herself on the desk. As she did so, a camera zoomed in to enlarge the image, broadcasting it live to millions of viewers who were watching the hearing unfold in real time. The image on the screen displayed a comparison of federal dollars allocated to a state versus the amount of federal taxes that the same state contributed. Specifically, for every single dollar that taxpayers from Louisiana sent to Washington, the state received $3.64 in federal funding. This meant that a substantial portion of the federal money flowing into Louisiana, more than half, was effectively a return of the taxes paid by its residents. Such a ratio placed Louisiana second in the entire country for its level of dependence on federal financial support. The woman paused briefly, allowing the significance of this data to sink in for everyone present. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but think about my own home state, Texas, which received only about $1.20 for each dollar of taxes paid. She then fixed her gaze directly on Higgins, the congressman from Louisiana. It struck me as particularly ironic that, when the congressman was urging me to focus on the challenges facing my own state, I found it noteworthy, and even somewhat amusing, that my constituents were, in effect, helping to subsidize his state's needs with their tax dollars. Perhaps instead of questioning my qualifications as a representative, he might consider explaining to this committee why Louisiana, despite receiving nearly 4 times as much federal support per tax dollar as many other states, continues to rank at the bottom of the list in areas such as education, healthcare, infrastructure, and economic opportunity. The room hushed for a moment as a quiet murmur spread among the attendees. Some of them had begun to take notes or check statistics on their phones, clearly intrigued by the figures being presented. The response from Crockett was persuasive, not only because of the undeniable facts, but also because of how directly they challenged Higgins's initial attack on her credentials and experience. Higgins pressed the button once again, his face now flushed with redness and evident frustration. "Mr. Chairman," he demanded, "I request some time to respond to these misleading accusations." The chairman hesitated briefly, but then nodded in acknowledgement. "A representative from Louisiana will have 2 minutes," he announced. Higgins leaned forward, his voice tense but controlled, as he prepared to defend himself. A kind-hearted woman from Texas, sitting nearby, appeared to be unaware of the full scope of difficulties faced by Louisiana. She spoke confidently, emphasizing the natural disasters and economic hardships that had plagued her neighboring state over recent years. "We have endured hurricanes, devastating floods, and historic economic challenges," she explained. Crockett interrupted her, pointing out, "Such information comes from a gentleman who suggests that natural disasters only affect Louisiana." He was quick to remind everyone that Texas had also faced its share of destructive hurricanes, winter storms that knocked out power grids, and floods that destroyed thousands of homes, illustrating that these issues are widespread and do not discriminate based on state borders. The chairman intervened again, calling for order. "The floor now goes to the gentleman from Louisiana," he announced. Higgins continued, but this time he was in a defensive posture. He argued that the selected statistics only told part of the story and failed to capture the full picture of Louisiana's progress. "Throughout my time in Congress," he said, "Louisiana has achieved significant advancements in many areas." He asked Crockett to simply consider the facts, implying that the data he presented was a reflection of ongoing improvement. Higgins hesitated briefly, then added, "Our energy sector remains vital to national security. We have seen economic growth in many communities across the state." Crockett nodded in response, acknowledging these points. Yet he pointed out that since Higgins took office in 2017, Louisiana had experienced a decline in its rankings related to economic opportunities, healthcare outcomes, and educational achievement. This stark contrast served as a reminder that progress is often uneven and that statistics can tell different stories depending on the perspective. The debate continued, with each side emphasizing their respective narratives, but the core issue remained clear. Despite the substantial federal support Louisiana received, the state continued to face persistent challenges in key areas that directly impact the quality of life of its residents. This is not a matter of selective statistics, Congressman. These figures come straight from the very same federal agencies whose budgets you repeatedly vote to fund or defund during each legislative cycle. She turned to the chairman of the committee, her voice steady and deliberate. Mr. Chairman, she began, I am not here today to debate the issues facing Louisiana alone. My purpose is to discuss how federal investment in infrastructure can serve the interests of all our communities across the country. However, when a colleague questions my qualifications and implies that I am not focused on the real issues at hand, I believe it is crucial to respond with facts and clarity. The room's atmosphere shifted noticeably. What initially appeared to be an attempt by Higgins to diminish Croquette's credibility quickly transformed into an opportunity for her to clearly demonstrate why his accusations were unfounded. Members of the committee, who at first seemed somewhat uncomfortable with the personal tone of the exchange, gradually shifted their attention to the substantive issues that had been raised. Croquette continued, emphasizing, the real problem here isn't about me or Congressman Higgins, it's about accountability. When representatives receive federal resources but fail to improve the lives of their constituents, we need to ask why that is happening, rather than attacking colleagues who are genuinely trying to ensure taxpayer dollars are used effectively. She then reached for the final document she had brought with her. Speaking about accountability, she took the liberty of examining the voting records of Congressman Higgins concerning infrastructure legislation during his time in office. The mood in the room once again began to change. Several staff members, perhaps sensing what was coming, started hurriedly typing on their phones, likely alerting their superiors to the developing situation. It became evident that Congressman Higgins had voted against a bipartisan infrastructure bill that allocated $70 billion to Louisiana, part of a broader $25 billion fund for roads and bridges, as well as $580 million for water infrastructure and $100 million for broadband expansion. He also opposed the Inflation Reduction Act, which included significant funding to support climate adaptation measures, particularly for coastal states like Louisiana. She looked directly at Higgins, her gaze steady and unwavering. So, when you say I don't understand how to build, she asked, I wonder, am I truly the one lacking understanding? Or is it simply that I believe we should vote in favor of funding this kind of construction? Sensing that the discussion was approaching a natural conclusion, the chairman attempted to steer the hearing back to its main purpose. I believe it's time we return to the topic of today's hearing, he said. Would the gentleman from Ohio like to continue his questions with the members of the committee? But before the hearing could proceed, Higgins insisted on having the final word. Mr. Chairman, he declared, the personal attacks made by this gentleman on my reputation and my state are unacceptable. I have worked tirelessly for my constituents, and this misleading statistics do not reflect the real progress we have achieved. Throughout the exchange, it was clear that the tension was mounting, yet Croquette remained composed, steadfast in her pursuit of facts and responsible governance, determined to ensure that accountability was at the core of the discussion. Jasmine Croquette offered a slight, almost imperceptible smile. Her tone was calm yet firm as she addressed the congressman. Congressman, I want to clarify that I have not directed any criticism towards you personally, nor towards your state. My comments have solely been about presenting facts, specifically statistical rankings of Louisiana across various indicators, along with the outcomes of your voting records on legislation that could potentially address some of these issues. If you interpret facts as some form of burden or burdening tax, that says far more about your reputation than it does about the validity of my statements. A hush fell over the chamber, as if the entire room paused in collective surprise. Even the chairperson seemed momentarily lost for words, the usual command of the proceedings momentarily slipping from their grasp. After a brief silence, Croquette continued, summarizing her stance. I am prepared to hand back the rest of my allotted time. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to engaging in a discussion on how we can ensure that federal infrastructure funding genuinely translates into tangible improvements for all our constituents, regardless of the state they call home. The exchange, which lasted less than a quarter of an hour, had a profound and immediate impact. The staff members, already hastening toward their offices, began preparing statements and responses. Journalists covering the hearing fervently typed up articles, capturing every word and nuance of the confrontation. Meanwhile, social media platforms erupted with clips and snippets from the exchange, spreading rapidly across networks. What had begun as an attempt by Congressman Hagan to put a young colleague in her place quickly evolved into a revealing and, in many ways, destructive examination of his own actions and the performance of his state. It wasn't only the raw facts that made Croquet's reply so compelling. It was the meticulousness of her preparation, the strategic deployment of evidence, and her ability to respond with calm precision to an attack she could not have anticipated. In the often theatrical world of congressional hearings, where spectacle and emotional appeals sometimes overshadow substance, Jasmine Croquette had just demonstrated a masterclass in the art of effective argumentation. Like a seasoned chess player thinking several moves ahead, she had crafted her responses carefully, turning the encounter into a display of disciplined wit and factual clarity. Within minutes of the conclusion of the session, videos capturing Croquet's exchanges with Higgins flooded social media at record-breaking speeds. The most viral clip was undoubtedly Croquet's challenge to Higgins to name at least one measure by which Louisiana ranked among the top 25 states. Higgins's subsequent silence and eloquent pause was already viewed over 2 million times in just the first hour. This simple yet powerful moment resonated across the country, making Croquet's remarks and Louisiana's statistical standing trending topics nationwide. Her points about Louisiana's economic and social metrics became a national trend, sparking widespread discussion and analysis. Higgins, for his part, appeared to accept the blow more quietly, perhaps realizing the depth of Croquet's strategic and factual edge. Political commentators from across the spectrum voiced their opinions, and even conservative analysts acknowledged the effectiveness of Croquet's counterargument. One prominent political strategist, Maria Cardona, expressed her view on CNN. What we just witnessed is a textbook example of how to respond to baseless attacks. Congresswoman Croquette did not resort to emotion or personal insults. Instead, she relied on facts, statistics, and a direct challenge to Higgins' reputation. The impact was powerful precisely because it was substantive. On the other side, Fox News offered a different perspective. Anchor Shan Hannity remarked, Congresswoman Croquet's criticisms of Louisiana were unfair to the hard-working residents of that state who have faced enormous hardships and have persevered against tough odds. This divergence of opinions highlighted the ongoing debate over the effectiveness and fairness of political discourse. But what remained clear was that Croquet's strategic approach had left a significant mark on the proceedings and public consciousness alike. Even the most conservative commentators found themselves unable to defend Higgins' initial unprovoked attack or his apparent inability to effectively challenge Crockett's statistical claims. Upon returning to the nation's capital, representatives from both parties engaged in careful reflection, trying to process what they had witnessed. When Crockett exited the chamber after her speech, she was approached by several Democratic colleagues who offered her restrained words of congratulations, acknowledging her composure amid the intense exchange. Perhaps more telling than any formal praise was the subtle shift in the demeanor of a few Republican members, who quietly distanced themselves from Higgins in the corridor, avoiding direct association with his aggressive stance. One anonymous Republican delegate later confided to reporters that such conduct was unproductive and unbecoming of congressional decorum, emphasizing that personal insults only served to undermine the dignity of the legislative process. Higgins rushed out of the chamber without engaging with the questions hurled at him by journalists, brushing past them as if he were eager to escape the scene. His office promptly issued a statement, attempting to shape the narrative. It described Crockett's presented image of Louisiana as misleading, claiming it failed to acknowledge the remarkable progress achieved by the state and the unique challenges it faces. According to the statement, Higgins remains firmly committed to delivering tangible results for his constituents rather than participating in theatrical political disputes. Yet despite these assertions, the damage was already done. Local newspapers across Louisiana were quick to run headlines such as Congressman Higgins' credibility questioned in state rankings, or federal funds under scrutiny as Louisiana faces funding reconsideration. The following morning, the Shreveport Times, one of the largest newspapers in the state, published an editorial titled Beyond the Confrontation, which questioned the accuracy of Crockett's statistics about Louisiana. Fact-checking confirmed that her figures were indeed correct, further fueling the ongoing debate and intensifying the controversy. What initially appeared to be a routine clash in Congress quickly escalated into a nationwide issue, attracting attention far beyond typical political skirmishes. Crockett's office was flooded with interview requests, and her social media following surged by over 200,000 new followers within just a single day. More importantly, political analysts began to seriously scrutinize her core arguments regarding federal funding, accountability, and measurable outcomes, recognizing her as a serious legislator rather than merely a participant in partisan theater. 3 days after the heated hearing, Crockett appeared on the program Meeting with the Press, where she shifted the focus away from the personal confrontation and towards substantive policy issues. "This isn't about Congressman Higgins or myself," she explained. "It's about whether we are using taxpayers' money effectively to improve the lives of Americans. When states receive substantial federal aid yet continue to rank at the bottom in education, healthcare, and infrastructure, we have to ask a difficult question. Where is that money actually going?" Her transition from a personal dispute to a discussion about policy fundamentals not only bolstered her reputation, but also positioned her as a dedicated lawmaker committed to meaningful change, rather than just another participant in Washington's endless partisan battles. Meanwhile, Higgins found himself on the defensive, fielding uncomfortable questions from his own constituents. At the City Hall in Lake Charles, Louisiana, a voter directly questioned him about Crockett's statistics, pressing him to clarify his stance and the accuracy of the data he had challenged so vocally. "Is it truly the case that for every dollar of federal taxes sent to Washington, Americans are getting back nearly $4 in return? And if that is indeed accurate, then why do we continue to face persistent difficulties in obtaining even the most basic public services?" These questions highlight a broader issue related to the impact and effectiveness of federal funding. The subject sparked widespread debate across Louisiana concerning the state's federal financial support and the tangible results it produces. Local news outlets began publishing investigative reports that scrutinized how federal dollars allocated for infrastructure over the past decade had been spent within the state. Approximately 2 weeks after a series of congressional hearings, a public opinion poll conducted in Louisiana's 3rd congressional district revealed an unexpected shift in voter sentiment. The approval rating of Congressman Higgins dropped by 7 percentage points as constituents expressed growing concern about his ability to deliver meaningful improvements and effectively address their needs. Meanwhile, a potential challenger in the upcoming primary elections, State Senator Jeremy Stein, publicly stated that he was seriously contemplating running against Higgins. He emphasized the importance of delivering concrete results rather than engaging in rhetorical promises, making clear that action, not words, would determine his decision to run. For those observing Congress from the outside, this exchange of messages carried significance far beyond a typical political spat. It demonstrated how a new generation of representatives was fundamentally altering the dynamics of political confrontation. Political science professor Melissa Harris Perry pointed out that Crockett's response was remarkably effective, not solely because of the facts she presented. She had done her homework, not just on policy details, but also on her colleagues' vulnerabilities. Crockett was prepared for an attack she could not have anticipated, having carefully studied Higgins' record and the outcomes of his actions. Her strategic approach allowed her to turn a potentially damaging moment into an opportunity to assert her competence and resolve. A month after the hearings, the influence of this incident extended into broader political discourse. The House Oversight Committee announced a new initiative aimed at tracking how federal funds are spent across states, with a focus on measuring the effectiveness of federal investments in improving educational outcomes, healthcare services, and infrastructure projects. The committee chairman highlighted the importance of this effort by stating, "Recent discussions have underscored the need for greater accountability in how federal resources are utilized at the state level. This is not a matter of party politics. Taxpayers in all 50 states deserve transparency and assurance that their money is being used efficiently and effectively." For Jasmine Croquette, this confrontation marked a turning point in her congressional career. What could have been seen as a challenging moment instead showcased her preparedness, composure, and strategic mindset. Rather than reacting emotionally to Higgins' attacks, she managed to reframe the entire conversation around policy substance and accountability. The ultimate proof of how profoundly this exchange reshaped the political landscape came 6 weeks later, when Clay Higgins noticeably failed to appear at a joint hearing where Crockett was scheduled to speak. His office cited scheduling conflicts as the reason for his absence, but few in Washington believed that explanation. The message was clear: Higgins was avoiding confrontation, and his silence spoke volumes about the shifting power dynamics in the political arena. In the realm of politics, there are moments that serve as profound lessons, reminding everyone involved of the importance of respecting the strength and intelligence of one's opponents. One such instance involved a congresswoman who, in an attempt to assert dominance over a colleague, learned a harsh but valuable lesson about the dangers of underestimating an adversary. This experience, while initially seeming to be a simple clash of personalities, ultimately revealed deeper truths about the nature of political contestation and strategic communication. The most enduring impact of this confrontation, however, extended beyond the immediate personal rivalry or even the career trajectories of those directly involved. It centered on how the public perceives the relationship between federal funding and the tangible outcomes within individual states. Over the following months, the statistical data from Louisiana increasingly became a symbol in political debates, illustrating stark discrepancies between the resources allocated to the state and the results achieved. These figures served as a stark reminder that in politics, accountability is not solely a matter of rhetoric or confrontation, but is ultimately rooted in concrete results. When it was revealed that Louisiana's expenditures did not correspond to improvements in key areas like education, infrastructure, or public health, it cast a spotlight on the effectiveness, or lack thereof, of federal support and local governance. Such revelations underscored the idea that political responsibility hinges on performance and measurable outcomes, rather than on mere posturing or verbal battles. This narrative became particularly notable when Jasmine Croquette utilized the Louisiana statistics to counter and dismantle a political opponent, Clay Higgins. Her strategic use of data transformed a typical debate into a compelling demonstration of how facts, when properly prepared and presented, can effectively challenge personal attacks and misinformation. Crockett's approach exemplified the significance of thorough preparation and the ability to respond convincingly to personal criticisms with substantive evidence. Her success in this instance was not just a fleeting viral moment, but a clear illustration of the power of well-founded communication within the legislative environment. The significance of this case extends beyond the immediate political skirmish. It highlights a vital principle: that in the arena of political discourse, victory often belongs to those who are best prepared to articulate their points with clarity and backed by reliable data. It also serves as a reminder that, ultimately, the legitimacy of political debates and the respect they command depend on the quality of the arguments and the facts supporting them. For observers and participants alike, this episode reaffirmed the importance of diligent research and strategic responsiveness in shaping public perception and influencing policy discussions. If you found this analysis to be insightful, it is highly recommended to reflect on the importance of preparation and evidence-based arguments in political debates. Such lessons underscore the value of understanding the nuances of data and its role in shaping public opinion. Engaging with these ideas can deepen one's appreciation for the complexity of effective communication in politics. To stay informed about the latest developments and in-depth political analyses, consider exploring further resources or engaging in discussions about current political contests. Sharing your thoughts and opinions on these matters can contribute to a more informed and thoughtful discourse, fostering a better understanding of how facts and strategic communication influence the political landscape.